Green and James jawing at each other while play continues. Iguodala the pull-up. That won't go.
This punch by Draymond Green and the fallout afterwards is potentially the most impactful play in the history of the modern NBA. I can draw a line directly from this punch to an alternate universe in which the Sixers trade for James Harden and Ben Simmons ends up in Houston, completely avoiding the debacle of the past few months, where Paul George teams up with LeBron in Cleveland, Kawhi never joins the Raptors, the Suns don't make the 2021 NBA Finals, and about a million other things, all of which would have resulted from Draymond not throwing this punch. This is NBA to Z. The 2016 NBA Finals were one of the most controversial, impactful, and arguably entertaining finals in league history, with the 73-win Warriors facing the LeBron, Kyrie, Kevin Love Cavs in a series that ultimately went 7 games and gave us some of the most iconic moments in NBA history. The block, the stop, the shot, and the punch? In the moment, the punch really didn't seem like that big of a deal. Draymond Green and LeBron James got tangled up off the ball at the end of a Game 4 that was pretty much already decided, with the Warriors about to take a commanding 3-1 lead in the series. There was some pushing and shoving, some words exchanged, and that was about it. Pretty typical for an NBA altercation. However, upon review a day later, this altercation completely changed not only the outcome of this series, but the trajectory of nearly half the franchises in the entire league. What was really significant about this sequence was that Draymond Green had already committed 3 flagrant fouls in the 2016 postseason, and a 4th would lead to an automatic suspension. Although it was not called a flagrant foul on the floor at the time, the league reviewed the incident and ultimately decided that it was in fact a flagrant foul, and suspended Draymond Green for a potentially championship-clinching Game 5 at home for Golden State. Interestingly, the league itself admitted when they made the decision that Green's actions on their own did not warrant a suspension. But the suspension was handed out anyway once he reached that 4th flagrant foul threshold. And by the way, this was a final series that was kind of coming up short from an entertainment standpoint to that point. This was the 73-win, record-breaking Warriors against a crazy talented Cavs team, and games 1 through 3 were huge blowouts. Were the Warriors really just going to roll through the Cavs in the finals after being pushed to 7 games by the Thunder in the conference finals? Nah, the NBA had to keep this series going, right? So the big conspiracy theory here goes, they made the Draymond thing look really dramatic, reviewed it after the fact, and suspended him so that the Cavs had a chance on the road in Game 5, and the Cavs went on to win the title in one of the most memorable Game 7s of all time, saving the TV ratings and making the league a ton of money. Okay, I don't actually believe that part, but I do believe that if Draymond doesn't get suspended for Game 5, the Warriors win the 2016 NBA title, which completely changes the landscape of the future of the league. You have to remember, this is a Warriors team that was chasing history all season long. They got the regular season wins record, they were coming off of a grueling and draining series against Oklahoma City in the previous round. A quick final series was their best chance to finish off that season with a title. They were, by their own admission years later, completely exhausted physically and mentally by the time that season was over, with the constant pressure and toll of the win streak and wins records they were trying to break and set. Once they went up 3-1 in convincing fashion, the series was basically done. No team in the history of the league had lost a 3-1 series lead in the finals. The Warriors were clearly the better team, and it was over. But LeBron and Kyrie both dropped 41 in Game 5. LeBron dropped 41 again in Game 6, and we all know what happened in Game 7. The block, the stop, the shot. Cleveland wins the title, and you can go back to this exact moment to see where the series began to shift for the Cavs. Now, like I said, the Warriors are winning that series if Draymond doesn't get suspended, and that by itself already has a crazy impact on the league as a whole, changing a champion from a given season. But what makes this event so unique is just how far-reaching of an impact that the punch truly had. Now, this is where the parallel universe aspect of this comes into play. For the entirety of the rest of this video, we are operating under the assumption that Draymond does not throw the punch in Game 4, does not get suspended from Game 5, and the Warriors win the 2016 NBA title. What does that mean for the rest of the league? Well, let's start here. Draymond getting suspended and the Warriors ultimately losing the 2016 finals led directly to Kevin Durant signing with the Warriors as a free agent in the 2016 offseason. There is a 0% chance that in the summer of 2016, KD would have joined a Warriors team that not only won 73 games, but also just won the title. It was controversial enough for him to join the Warriors in the first place. It would have been even more ridiculous if he joined the team that just won a championship, and a team that the Thunder nearly beat in the conference finals as well. So if KD never signs with the Warriors, what does he do? Well, there are a couple of options here. The most likely, in my opinion, is probably that he comes back to OKC, although it's unlikely it's on a long-term deal. Maybe he signs a 1 or 2 year deal and sees if they can make another run at the title. Again, I can't emphasize enough how close the Thunder were to getting to the 2016 finals. If Klay Thompson doesn't go off late in that series, causing the Thunder to blow a 3-1 lead of their own, who knows what the next few years look like in the NBA. But going back to Durant, there are some other theories out there about him being really interested in potentially joining the Wizards or a handful of other teams, but I do think he stays in OKC for at least another year if the Warriors win the 2016 title. Now, if the Thunder were to fall short of the finals once again in the following year or two, maybe he leaves in 2017 or 2018, but regardless, as it relates to the Warriors, they never would have had KD on the team if they won the 2016 finals, because 2016 was the only chance they had to sign him as a free agent from a salary cap standpoint. However, there is one really fun scenario here that I do want to mention. What about KD to the Celtics in the 2016 offseason? They were heavily in contention to sign Durant at the time. He reportedly was upset with the Thunder for continually trying to get younger rather than push for a title, and he wasn't a huge fan of Billy Donovan. The Celtics, meanwhile, had a ton of different trade pieces they could use to build a team around Durant, and a widely respected coach in Brad Stevens. And you know who else joined the Celtics just a year later? KD's buddy, Kyrie Irving. We know that those two wanted to play together for a while, and although Irving didn't initially put the Celtics on his wish list when he requested a trade from the Cavs in 2017, you'd imagine he would have if KD was already there. There is a much longer conversation coming later about how the Cavs are impacted by all this, but I honestly think the Celtics would have been the favorites to sign KD back in 2016 if he decided to leave Oklahoma City and the Warriors weren't an option because they won the 2016 title. That is just a hint of the kind of craziness we're going to be getting into in this parallel universe. Okay, back to the Warriors just for a bit. If they don't sign KD in 2016, then they likely bring back Harrison Barnes, who they moved among other players to make room to sign Durant, and continue to run it back with the core of that 73-win team. It's hard to say what roster changes they could have made if they didn't bring in Durant, but they'd certainly be a title contender once again in the following 2017 season, as I'll get into in a bit. But I want to continue the thread here for the Warriors just a bit further. If KD never signs with them in 2017, then they never trade KD to the Nets in 2019, a trade in which they got D'Angelo Russell in exchange, who they then flipped for Andrew Wiggins and the pick that became James Wiseman. That not only heavily impacts this current Warriors team, but those two guys are also two huge potential trade pieces, and if one or both of them are moved for a significant piece down the road, that only furthers the crazy impact of the Draymond suspension in 2016 on the Warriors. Okay, moving on a bit now, let's talk about the 2017 finals. We all know that the Cavs and Warriors once again matched up, and with a newly signed Durant, the Warriors pretty much breezed to another title, with that 2017 Warriors team largely considered the greatest and most talented NBA team of all time. However, what gets lost completely from that final series is that that 2017 Cavs team was the best group they had in any of those finals runs with LeBron. The 2016 team won the title, but the 2017 team was better. They were such a devastating offensive team, and I honestly don't think that the Warriors would have been able to keep up if they hadn't signed Durant. So essentially, that Draymond suspension flips the 2016 and 2017 titles in this alternate reality that we're currently living in. But once again, we have to talk about how all of this impacts player movement in the years following 2016, and for the Cavs specifically, there is one huge variable: Kyrie Irving. It has been rumored that Kyrie was already so unhappy that he nearly requested a trade from the Cavs in the original 2016 offseason. That's right, the offseason immediately after winning the title with Cleveland. So just like with Durant not going to Golden State, there's a couple of different ways you can go with Irving's future with the Cavs if they don't, in this scenario, win the 2016 title. If Draymond doesn't get suspended and the Cavs don't win the title in 2016, this Cavs roster is likely wildly different the following year. Does Kyrie ask out after losing in the 2016 finals as he did originally in the 2017 offseason? Do the Cavs decide to trade Kevin Love in the 2016 offseason, as was heavily rumored was the plan if they lost in 2016? And if one or both of these things happen, would the Cavs still go on to win the title in 2017 against the Durantless Warriors or any other contender from the West, as I predicted earlier? Okay, that's a lot to unpack. To me, I think at least one of Irving or Love is gone in the 2016 offseason. The common theme among insiders from not only that 2016 Cavs team, but going back even further into LeBron history from the 2013 Heat team, both of which went on to win the title in dramatic fashion, was that the third banana forwards from those groups, Kevin Love and Chris Bosh respectively, would have been traded the following off seasons had they not gone on to win the title. With LeBron created teams, there has to be a scapegoat, and Love likely would have been the first choice in 2016 had they not won the title. The Irving aspect of this, however, is as hard to decipher as ever. He never wanted to play with LeBron in the first place, and his patience was really growing thin even after winning the title. So it is reasonable to say that he likely would have gone through with his trade request in 2016, a year earlier than he actually did in 2017. Okay, so let's roll with that for just a second. The Love trade possibilities are harder to identify because he was never actually moved, but the Kyrie stuff is really interesting. If we fast forward a year, obviously Irving was moved to Boston for Isaiah Thomas and the pick that became Colin Sexton, but in 2016, things were different for Boston. IT wasn't coming off of a second-team All-NBA season in 2016 the way that he was in 2017, meaning the Celtics would have had to trade more in exchange for Irving, potentially involving picks that became guys like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. That super fun Kyrie and KD and Boston theory from earlier is possible here, but my biggest issue is I really don't think the Cavs would be super excited to trade Kyrie to a team that, in this scenario, already had KD on it, creating a direct competitor to them for the title with LeBron still in Cleveland. Obviously, Kyrie did originally end up in Boston in 2017, but if KD is already waiting there for him, I can't see them making this move. You also have to consider how Gordon Hayward fits into all this, who the Celtics signed as a free agent in the 2017 offseason, the same year they traded for Kyrie. And if KD is already there, then that means no Hayward. But in 2016, they also signed Al Horford. And you can tell where I'm going with this. It gets so complicated that it's impossible to predict. But the point stands. Kyrie and KD to the Celtics would have been really fun and was 100% possible if Draymond doesn't get suspended in the 2016 finals. Back to the Irving stuff as a whole for a bit. There are other rumors to sift through as well, including Irving potentially ending up in Phoenix, but there's one rumor from 2017 that I really want to focus on, and that involves Paul George coming to Cleveland. In 2017, there was a deal in place that would have sent George to the Cavs in exchange for Love, among other pieces, as George made it known to the Pacers that he would be leaving in free agency the following offseason. Now, you can go a ton of different directions with this. If Irving wants to ask out of Cleveland a year earlier in 2016 after losing the title, do the Cavs trade him for George in that offseason, or does the original Love trade actually happen? It's impossible to know with the timeline being pushed up a year and with Irving unlikely to commit to all but a handful of teams, but still. Let's assume for a moment that Draymond doesn't get suspended, the Warriors win the 2016 title, Kyrie wants out, and he gets moved to Indiana for George. Regardless of whether or not the Cavs go on to win the title, that one move of George ending up in Cleveland changes about 1,000 different things across the league. Let's assume that in this scenario, KD sticks around with the Thunder. Remember, the Pacers ultimately traded George to the Thunder once KD left, pairing him with Russell Westbrook. If that never happens, maybe George to the Cavs becomes more likely. But more interestingly, what does George do over the next couple of years? He was a 2018 free agent with strong interest in joining the Lakers, just like his now new teammate, LeBron. It would have been unprecedented for the Lakers to sign two max players away from the same team, but when they were on separate teams originally, many people thought that the Lakers' master plan was to sign both PG and LeBron in 2018 free agency. As we know, however, PG surprisingly re-signed with OKC, and LeBron went to the Lakers anyway. So from here, if we assume that the Cavs trade Kyrie for George, there are a couple ways this goes. If it works out, the Cavs probably win the 2017 and maybe 2018 titles as well, and LeBron might stay in Cleveland. It seems like the LA move was in the cards for LeBron for a while, but there had to be some amount of success that would have caused him to stay for at least a year or two longer with the Cavs. If LeBron stays in Cleveland another year or two, that means the Lakers likely don't trade for Anthony Davis as well, and although they could always just sign him as a free agent down the road, because it always seemed like LA was his ultimate goal, the Lakers are obviously less enticing if LeBron isn't there. Maybe Davis ends up signing ultimately with the Clippers simply because of a desire to be in LA, and he either joins Kawhi there or goes by himself, potentially taking the spot of Paul George, which is another domino to consider. If LeBron and PG are happy in Cleveland, then PG likely re-signs with the Cavs, and if they're making the finals every year, George wouldn't be available for Kawhi to call up and ask to join him with the Clippers. Going back even further than that, LeBron leaving the East and heading to LA was a large reason the Raptors were so aggressive in trading for Kawhi in the first place, which ultimately won them the 2019 title. If LeBron is still in the East, that run with Kawhi might never have happened. Where Kawhi would have been traded is impossible to predict, but you can see the long-term impact this would have had on the Cavs and a ton of other teams. Now, you can also go the other way here. If the LeBron and PG thing doesn't work out in Cleveland, then what happens? They aren't going to both sign with the Lakers in 2018 if things don't work in Cleveland, so assuming LeBron goes to LA and the Anthony Davis thing still happens, I have no idea what happens with George. Maybe he signs with the Clippers and brings someone else with him. Maybe the Heat somehow get involved in all of this, as they did by bringing in Jimmy Butler. It's just complete chaos. So now in one scenario, we have no KD in Golden State, KD and Russ still together in OKC, Kyrie in Indiana, and PG and LeBron together in Cleveland. Further into the future from that puts into question LeBron in LA, George and Kawhi in LA, KD and Kyrie together in Brooklyn, KD's lost season due to an Achilles injury with the Warriors, the number of titles for the Warriors and what that means for Curry's legacy, all as a direct result of Draymond being suspended for Game 5 of the 2016 NBA Finals. And I can honestly just keep going with this. Continuing with the Thunder for a moment, if KD stays in OKC long-term, then it makes sense that Russ would too, meaning no trade to Houston and then to Washington and then to LA. That means no Chris Paul to the Thunder trade and then Paul being traded to the Suns. And who knows, maybe Russ and KD are still on OKC to this day with a championship or two to their name. That would also mean no MVP year for Russ, probably no record-breaking triple-double seasons from him, and likely a different team representing the West in the 2021 NBA Finals with no Chris Paul in Phoenix. And the thread continues. With no Kyrie or KD in Brooklyn, that means no James Harden trade to the Nets, and he either ends up in Philly with Ben Simmons and Houston, completely avoiding this current Sixers debacle, or never request a trade from Houston in the first place. Because again, with all this, you have to consider how the changing rosters of the Warriors and the Cavs impact the following few championships and how that would in turn impact player movement. There were years in which you could argue that the Rockets were the best team in the league outside of the KD Warriors, and if KD isn't there, maybe Harden wins a title with the Rockets and sticks around longer. Maybe the Sixers break through to the finals if Kawhi isn't there in Toronto. Maybe the Celtics are the breakthrough East team with KD or Kyrie, or maybe they become the new Kawhi trade team. Maybe the Cavs get an awesome pick in a Kyrie trade and end up with LeBron, Paul George in a Kevin Love trade, and Jason Tatum. All of these are real, legitimate possibilities. And the reason there are so many possibilities from this one incident, seriously, this isn't even like half the possible outcomes, is because of the unprecedented player movement that followed the 2016 finals. We've all gotten used to stars requesting trades and leaving in free agency, but the few years following 2016 were on a completely different level. And it all goes back to Durant and ultimately the Draymond suspension. KD leaving OKC for Golden State set off a domino effect of immense proportions, with a dozen or so all-NBA caliber players' careers affected, making it unique among critical events in the history of the NBA. You might have a particular moment change the course of history in small-ish ways, but the outsized number of big transactions that happened in just a few years span following the 2016 NBA Finals makes Draymond's suspension, in my opinion, the single most impactful basketball play in the modern history of the league.